Ever had your own family turn against you and steal what's rightfully yours? Imagine finding out your younger brother, your parents' favorite, wrongfully took your inheritance, with your own parents backing him up. This is the story of betrayal, revenge, and what happens when the forgotten son finally fights back. I, 32M, have a younger brother, Kyle, 28M. Growing up, we were close in that I have to love you because you're my brother kind of way. But honestly, our relationship was always tilted. Kyle was the golden child. If you've ever been the scapegoat in a family dynamic, you'll get what I mean. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. If I got a B, they'd ask why it wasn't an A. If Kyle got a C, they'd say at least he tried. You know the drill. My grandparents were the only ones who ever called it out. My grandpa, especially. He once pulled me aside after Christmas when I was 14 and told me, "You know, it's not fair, the way they treat you. But don't lose yourself over it. People like us have to make our own way." At the time I just nodded, not really understanding what he meant. Now I get it. Kyle was always getting bailed out. Caught with weed in high school. They blamed his friends. Failed his first year of college. They blamed the professors. Meanwhile, I was working part-time at a gas station to help pay for community college and barely getting a nod of acknowledgement from them. It was like my struggle was invisible, while his screw-ups were character building. I moved out at 19. Never looked back, really. They didn't fight it. Things went mostly quiet for a few years. I visited once or twice a year, did the good son thing out of obligation, while Kyle floated around from failed business idea to failed relationship. Every time I came over, he was there, lounging at home, still living with our parents. And every time I asked about the future or any plans, my mom would say something like, "Kyle just needs a little more time to figure things out." A part of me wanted to scream, "He's 27. Time for what?" But I kept my mouth shut. I guess the real shift started 2 years ago when Grandpa passed away. I was devastated. He'd been more of a father to me than my actual dad ever was. I didn't know it at the time, but that's when the real betrayal started, when Kyle and my parents decided to cut me out of what was rightfully mine. But I'll get to that. Right now, I just wanted to share the beginning, the roots, the cracks that were always there, long before everything exploded. Maybe if I'd listened more closely to my grandfather, I would have seen it coming. So, like I said, my grandfather passed away 2 years ago. It hit me hard. He was the only adult in my life who really saw me, not as someone to mold or manage, but as a person with worth. When he died, something inside me kind of broke open. I didn't even realize how much I leaned on his quiet presence until it was gone. The funeral was small and weirdly cold. My parents didn't seem as upset as I expected. Kyle was wearing sunglasses indoors like he was too cool to cry, and my dad kept checking his phone during the service. I thought maybe I was being overly sensitive, but something felt off, detached, almost like they were relieved. A few days after the funeral, my grandma called me, quiet, almost whispering like she didn't want to be heard. She said she had something for me, something Grandpa left specifically for me. I drove the 4 hours to see her that weekend. She met me at the door with teary eyes and a thick envelope in her hand. No greeting, no small talk. Just, he said if anything ever happened to him, and things didn't feel right, I should give this to you. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter and a photocopy of his will. The letter was a gut punch. Grandpa knew. He'd seen what was coming. He wrote about how proud he was of me for pushing forward on my own, how he always admired my grit and independence. And then, in the last paragraph, he told me the inheritance was supposed to be split 70/30ths between me and Kyle, not out of favoritism, but because I had earned every cent 10 times over, and he knew Kyle would just burn through it. That's when I noticed the line in the will. To my grandson, the one who stood on his own 2 feet, he was talking about me. No question. The problem? The will that was read to the family didn't include that line. The official version they all saw left everything. His savings, his property, even his coin collection, to my dad, who was then supposed to distribute it fairly between his sons. Spoiler alert, he didn't. That's when I started connecting the dots. Kyle had suddenly invested in a new car, got a bunch of expensive gear for his Twitch channel that no one watches, and was planning some vacation to Iceland for the mental reset. And my parents? Radio silent about Grandpa's estate. No mention of sharing. No thank you for visiting Grandma. Nothing. Something was very, very wrong. And it was just the beginning. After that visit to Grandma's, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading Grandpa's letter and staring at the photocopy of his original will. My gut told me something shady was going on, but I didn't want to believe my family would stoop that low. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe there was a second will. Maybe I was overreacting. I wasn't. A week later, I contacted Grandpa's old attorney, Mr. Bellamy, who had handled some property issues for him in the past. I asked if he had a copy of the original will. He hesitated at first, said he wasn't sure he could talk to me about it. But once I mentioned that Grandma had already given me a copy, and that something didn't match up with the version used in probate, he agreed to meet me, off the record. We sat in his cluttered office, the smell of old paper and coffee surrounding us like some kind of legal fog. Bellamy pulled out his file and laid the will on the desk. I compared it to the version Grandma gave me. Identical. Well, mostly. The one Bellamy had did say I was to receive 70% of the inheritance. It included that same personal message about me being the one who stood on his own 2 feet. That line wasn't just sentimental, it was legal. It clarified intent. Grandpa had written it into the will, and it had been notarized. But then Bellamy dropped the bomb. That's not the version your father submitted to probate. I remember just sitting there, jaw slack. What? He nodded slowly. Your father showed up with a completely different version. Claimed your grandfather updated it a few weeks before his death. I didn't see it until after it had gone through probate court. I was surprised, to put it mildly. My heart was pounding. So he forged it. Bellamy leaned back and said, I can't make accusations without proof. But let's just say, I've known your grandfather for 20 years. He never made legal changes without coming through me. I left that office with my head spinning. I'd been screwed. Lied to. My inheritance, my grandfather's final gift to me, had been erased. And now Kyle was out there driving a $45,000 car paid for with my money. I started feeling something that scared me. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. But hate. So after learning the truth from Grandpa's attorney, I couldn't unsee it. Everything about the past few months made perfect, infuriating sense. Kyle had suddenly gone from broke burnout to living like he was a mid-tier YouTube celeb. New car, high-end PC rig, a dumb mechanical keyboard with customizable RGB lights he couldn't shut up about, a whole streaming setup complete with ring lights, and a branded gaming chair. He even had the audacity to post on his Instagram stories. Success is all about patience. Trust the process. I wanted to punch my monitor. The worst part? My parents were right there in the background of his stories, beaming, supportive, hosting viewing parties of his Twitch stream in their living room like he was some kind of local celebrity. You'd think he was the second coming of Ninja, not some underachiever streaming Call of Duty to like 12 viewers, half of whom were probably bots or their bridge club friends trying to be supportive. I watched one stream just to see for myself. Kyle said mid-game, yeah, I was finally able to invest in myself, you know? My family really came through. He laughed and added, shout out to Dad for believing in the vision. Believing in the vision? It was my inheritance. My life. My chance to finally get ahead after spending years scraping by, living modestly, saving every cent while they treated me like some second-class ghost. And now they were cheering for him like he built himself up from the ground. My mom even commented, so proud of you, baby. Sparkling heart, under one of his stream clips. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Scratch that, I did both. At the same time. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what it represented, Grandpa's love. His legacy. Everything he wanted for me. And they took it. They rewrote history so the golden boy could keep shining. And I was done watching. I don't consider myself a confrontational person. I've spent most of my life avoiding drama, keeping my head down, and working twice as hard for half the credit. But this crossed a line I didn't even know I had. I gave myself a week to calm down before I drove over to my parents' house. I needed to make sure I wasn't walking in there with a baseball bat and a blackout rage. I rehearsed what I was going to say, over and over. But of course, it didn't go anything like I'd planned. Kyle was there when I pulled into the driveway. His Tesla, yep, AF **ing Tesla now **, was parked next to my dad's truck. He was wearing this smug little grin like he knew I was coming. I walked past him without saying a word and went straight into the house. My mom greeted me with that fake surprised voice she always used when I showed up unannounced. Oh, look who finally decided to visit. I ignored her and said, we need to talk. All of us. My dad came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel. What's this about? I looked him straight in the eyes. The will. Everything froze. Even Kyle shut up. I pulled out the copies. Grandpa's original will. The one Bellamy had. The one they didn't submit to probate. I laid it on the coffee table. I know what you did, and I know which version is real. Silence. Then, Dad muttered, that's not what he wanted at the end. My voice cracked. Don't you dare. He changed it. My mom jumped in, defensive. He told us he was worried you'd just blow through the money. Oh, really? Me? The one who's been working since he was 16? The one who actually visited Grandpa when he got sick? You're telling me he suddenly changed his mind and handed everything to you two and Kyle, without telling his lawyer? They didn't answer. Just stared. Kyle finally spoke. It's not a big deal, man. I'm gonna pay it forward. You act like it's some huge betrayal. I turned to him so fast he flinched. You let them steal from me. From Grandpa. Then you used it to play dress up on Twitch. You're not paying anything forward. You're just burning what you didn't earn. My mom started crying. Classic move. I didn't raise you to be so cruel. And I snapped. You didn't raise me at all. You raised him. I raised myself. I stood up. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked out before I did something I'd regret. But that night, I started planning. Because if they wanted to pretend like I didn't matter, like I wasn't part of the family, then they were about to find out just how much damage the forgotten son could do. I drove home from that confrontation feeling like my bones were buzzing. Not with fear, with clarity. Something had snapped into place. I wasn't going to roll over and take this. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I was going to take back what was mine and leave some scars along the way. I started with what I knew. My parents had committed fraud. They had submitted a forged will to probate court. That's a felony, and if I could prove it, they could face real legal consequences. I reached out to a lawyer friend of mine, Jules, someone I met during my night shift years at the gas station. She was scrappy, sharp, and didn't have a drop of patience for people who exploited the system. When I showed her the two wills and explained what happened, she whistled and said, "This is bad. Like prison bad. You could take them all to court." But here's the thing. I wasn't sure I wanted them in prison. I wanted them humiliated. So, we came up with a strategy. First, Jules started the legal process quietly, gathering evidence, subpoenaing bank records, requesting court transcripts, and quietly contacting Bellamy to provide a sworn affidavit that he never created or witnessed the updated will. Meanwhile, I started phase 2, exposing Kyle. It turns out Kyle was running his little Twitch business under a sketchy LLC, one my dad helped set up. They'd funneled most of Grandpa's inheritance through it, so they wouldn't raise flags when Kyle suddenly had tens of thousands in his account. And guess what? Kyle was also dodging taxes. Shocking, I know. I screenshotted everything. Business filings, financial posts, shady crypto partnerships Kyle bragged about in Discord. I started feeding anonymous tips to the IRS, Twitch, and even a local news blog that covers inheritance fraud and elder abuse. I wasn't just playing offense. I was setting traps, waiting for someone to take the bait. At the same time, I reconnected with my grandma. She'd always been quiet, but after seeing the paperwork and hearing how they'd forged Grandpa's wishes, she broke down. She told me she had felt pressured to stay silent. My dad made her feel like questioning it would dishonor Grandpa. But now she was pissed and ready to speak. With her backing, we had everything we needed: motive, witness, forged documents, a crooked paper trail, and a son dumb enough to livestream his crimes. It was time to light the match, but not before I set up the final piece of the plan, the surprise family reunion. So here's where things get messy and, honestly, kind of beautiful. I knew if I wanted this to really hit, I needed witnesses. Not just legal ones. Family ones. The cousins who always saw through the Golden Child Act. The aunt who got quietly cut out of the family after she accused my dad of financial bullying years ago. Even a couple of my dad's old friends who had drifted away but stayed just close enough to see what was going on. So I made up an excuse. A memorial dinner for Grandpa's second death anniversary. It wasn't a lie, technically. I even rented out the back room of a local Italian place Grandpa used to love. Invites went out by email, phone, and in some cases, printed and hand-delivered. Everyone thought it was going to be a quiet, sentimental gathering. Everyone except me. I even sent the invite to Kyle and my parents. My mom responded with a heart emoji. Kyle said, "Free food?" I'm their smiling face with sunglasses. My dad didn't reply at all. Perfect. The night of the reunion, everyone showed up. The mood was warm at first, lots of hugs, small talk, clinking wine glasses. There was this false sense of comfort, like everyone wanted to believe the family wasn't as broken as it clearly was. Then came the moment. I stood up, tapped my glass, and said I wanted to say a few words about Grandpa. I talked about what he meant to me, how he'd seen me when no one else did. I spoke about his strength, his loyalty, and his quiet sense of justice. Then I said, he also left something behind. Something important. Something some of you may not know about. I pulled out the original will and laid it gently on the table. Gasps. Actual gasps. The room went dead silent. My dad looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. My mom started blinking rapidly like she was buffering. Kyle, he muttered. Bro, what the hell is this? This, I said, is the original, notarized version of Grandpa's will. The one that left 70% of his estate to me. Not to my father. Not to Kyle. To me. I turned to Grandma, who was holding a folder in her lap. Without a word, she handed it over, her signed statement, confirming the will was never changed and that she'd been pressured into silence. And then I dropped the real bomb. I filed a petition with probate court to reopen the estate. Fraud charges are being considered. And Kyle, by the way, you might want to call a tax attorney. The room erupted. My aunt let out a Jesus Christ. Asterisk. My cousin immediately took out her phone to start texting someone. Kyle got up and yelled, "This is horrible. You're just bitter." My dad's face was turning redder than the marinara sauce. My mom started crying again. Of course, I didn't flinch. I just looked at each of them and said, "You tried to erase me. You forged Grandpa's final wishes and turned them into a meal ticket. And now, you get to live with what you did in public." I walked out, left them sitting there. And that was just the first explosion. The fallout from the reunion hit faster than I expected. Like, within hours. By the time I got home that night, my phone had blown up. 32 missed calls, over 60 texts. From family members I hadn't spoken to in years, from Kyle, even from my mom, who apparently found it appropriate to leave a 5-minute voicemail sobbing about how I'd publicly humiliated them. Yeah, no mention of stealing my inheritance. Just shame over being embarrassed. I didn't answer a single call. I didn't have to. By the next morning, the group chat that had been dead for months, Family Time Two Hearts, lit up like a bonfire. Screenshots of the will, reactions to my speech, cousins dropping comments like, "Always knew something was off with Uncle Dan," and "Honestly respect OP for doing what we all wish we had the guts to." It turned into a full-blown war zone. My aunt, the one who got quietly pushed out years ago, messaged me privately. "Thank you. Seriously, it's about time someone exposed them." My cousin Jen sent me a picture of Kyle's Twitch stream from the night before. He went live after the dinner. Apparently, he tried to spin it into some family drama content, like it was a reality show. He called me jealous and said I ambushed everyone for attention. Except, in the middle of the stream, people started calling him out in the chat. One user posted, "Did you really forge your dead grandpa's will for a gaming chair?" And another, "He said 70% went to his older brother. How do you explain that?" Kyle ended the stream 18 minutes in, deleted the VOD, then posted a weird Instagram story about taking a break from mental health. The next day, I got a message from Twitch's compliance team. They were looking into Kyle's account after credible fraud allegations were submitted by multiple users. That's when I realized the internet doesn't forget. And now it knew. But the real panic started when Jules called me 2 days later. They lawyered up. They know they're screwed. The probate court had accepted our petition to reopen Grandpa's estate. A full investigation was underway. If proven, not only could the forged will be invalidated, but criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy could follow. My dad could lose everything. His job, his pension, his freedom. And Kyle? Well, he'd already lost his dignity. Now he might lose a whole lot more. And yet, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Because part of me wanted justice. But another part of me wanted revenge. And that part was just getting started. Once the court accepted our petition to reopen the estate, everything started unraveling. Fast. They updated what was put under official scrutiny. Handwriting analysts were brought in. Bellamy submitted a sworn affidavit. Grandma gave a statement, confirming she never saw any revised will. and that Grandpa never discussed changing his wishes. The judge granted a temporary freeze on the estate assets, which meant Kyle's streaming business account, where the money had gone, was frozen too. The Tesla? Technically under the LLC. The car dealership got a notice of lien reevaluation. Kyle's face when it was towed out of their driveway. Yes, I got a photo from my aunt who lives nearby, with chef's kiss. Meanwhile, my dad was spiraling. He tried to act calm, like he had things under control, but I started getting word from old family friends and even one of his co-workers that he'd been acting off, making erratic decisions at work and snapping at people in meetings. One person even said, "Your dad had this moment where he just kind of stared out the window and said, 'I think my son's going to ruin me.'" "Correct, Dad. Correct." Then came the audit. Remember those anonymous tips? Well, turns out when you commit financial fraud using inheritance money and try to bury it in a half-baked Twitch LLC run by your fail son, the IRS notices. The investigation flagged suspicious transfers from Grandpa's estate into several personal and business accounts that were supposed to be held in trust until probate was finalized. Spoiler, they weren't. The government doesn't like that. And neither did the community. Because now that everything was public, other people were crawling out of the woodwork. One guy my dad did business with years ago came forward with a story about getting muscled out of a property deal after Grandpa had invested in it. Another cousin mentioned how Kyle borrowed $8,000 from them a few years back and never paid it back, just ghosted them entirely. The more people looked, the more it became clear. My family wasn't just dysfunctional. They were a house of cards built on manipulation, lies, and fake smiles. And I had just kicked the whole thing down. The part that got me the most, they never even denied it. Not really. They just acted like it was something I should have let go. Like I was being petty. Like I was the problem for refusing to be quietly erased. They stole from me. They stole Grandpa's last wish. And now, finally, they were watching it all collapse in slow motion, one card at a time. But we're not done. Not yet. About a week after the estate was frozen and the investigation officially became public record, Kyle messaged me. I was expecting something childish, maybe some empty threat or one of his classic gaslighting monologues. What I got instead was weird. It was a voice message. Not a text, not a call, a voice message. Like we were still in high school or something. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not his usual smug, performative tone. There was no bro this time. No cocky laugh. Just this weird, nervous edge. "Hey, I guess you're probably not in the mood to talk. I get it. I don't know, man. Everything's getting really bad. I didn't think it would blow up like this. I swear, I didn't mean to screw you over. I thought Dad had it all sorted. I didn't even look at the paperwork. I just trusted him." "Sure, Kyle. You just happened to buy a Tesla and start living like a crypto influencer on money you didn't ask any questions about." He kept going. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry. I really am. Maybe we can meet up? Just talk? I'll give you what's left, man. You can have it. I don't even want the money anymore." That part almost made me laugh. What's left? At this point, half of it's probably tied up in overpriced streaming gear, zero-return investments, and his Iceland trip that he very much did not cancel. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete the message, either. Instead, I sent it straight to Jules. It turns out apologizing after being named in a probate fraud investigation while under tax audit isn't exactly smart. In fact, it's a very helpful piece of evidence when you're trying to prove intent to benefit from known misappropriation of assets. Kyle just handed us a silver bullet wrapped in guilt and a voice crack. I thought that would be the end of it. But then something really unexpected happened. Grandma called me the next day and told me something I never saw coming. Something that changed everything. The day after Kyle's apology message, Grandma called me. Her voice was shaky, like she was carrying a heavy weight she'd kept bottled up for years. She said, "I know you're fighting for what's right, and I'm so proud of you. But there's something you need to know, something I never told anyone." I sat down, heart pounding. She told me about a time, long before Grandpa got sick, when my dad came to her asking for money. It was supposed to be a loan, she said, but he never paid it back. Not a penny. Grandma paused, swallowing hard. He asked for that loan to cover a business deal, something that failed. And after that, things just spiraled. Your grandfather was furious when he found out, but he didn't want to cause a family rift. She sighed. He tried to protect your father, even when he should have been protecting you. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't just the will or the inheritance. This went deeper, generations deep. I asked, "Why are you telling me now?" She whispered, "Because the truth has a way of coming out. And maybe it's time for the whole family to see who they really are." She told me there was more: documents, letters, even some old recordings Grandpa made, expressing regret over how my dad had handled money and trust. Grandma had kept them hidden, hoping the wounds would heal. But now, she wanted to hand everything over to me, to use in the fight. I realized then that this wasn't just about money or revenge anymore. It was about finally breaking a cycle, about reclaiming my family's legacy, and exposing the truth, no matter how ugly. Armed with Grandma's hidden documents and the attorney's backing, I filed a motion to present this new evidence in court. It was like dropping a legal bombshell. The recordings revealed Grandpa's private worries about my dad's reckless financial behavior and his pleas for honesty and responsibility. The letters showed Grandpa's intentions were crystal clear. He wanted me to inherit the majority because he trusted me to protect the family legacy. The court didn't waste time. They scheduled a hearing to reconsider the will's validity. My dad and Kyle were officially subpoenaed. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Reporters showed up. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. It was a public spectacle. Dad tried to defend himself, claiming the updated will was real and that he had acted in the family's best interest. Kyle sat next to him, looking defeated, no smirks this time. The judge reviewed the evidence one piece at a time. Grandma even took the stand, her voice steady as she testified about the pressure she faced and the hidden truth. When it was over, the judge ruled in my favor. The original will was reinstated. The estate assets were ordered to be returned to the rightful distribution, 70% to me, 30% to Kyle. And the court referred the forged will and financial misappropriation for criminal investigation. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with interest. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in their faces. Instead, I walked out quietly, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I'd won the fight, but the family I thought I had, that was gone. Winning the court case was supposed to feel like a victory, and in some ways it was. But it also left an emptiness I didn't expect. The fallout from the trial broke the family apart for good. My dad was forced to resign from his job amid the scandal. The local news ran stories about the case, painting him and Kyle as greedy opportunists. Kyle's Twitch channel tanked, and he vanished from social media. Mom, well, she retreated into silence, refusing to talk to any of us. Grandma moved into a small apartment nearby and started volunteering at a community center, trying to rebuild what little peace she could find. For me, things felt complicated. I finally had what was mine, but the cost was a family destroyed. I couldn't help but wonder if Grandpa would have wanted this kind of fallout. I spent months sorting through the estate, making sure everything was properly managed, investing responsibly as Grandpa had wanted. And slowly, I started to rebuild my own life, on my terms, without needing anyone's approval. What surprised me most was how much I had grown. This whole nightmare forced me to confront years of hurt and neglect. It made me realize I had been carrying around resentment that was weighing me down more than any stolen inheritance ever could. I learned that family doesn't always mean unconditional love. Sometimes, it's the people you choose to let in, the ones who stand by you when blood turns cold. After everything, I've come to see things a little clearer. Life isn't fair. Families are complicated and messy. But the biggest lesson I learned? I don't have to be a victim. I don't have to let their favoritism and lies define who I am or what I'm worth. I'm still the same guy who worked nights to pay tuition, who learned to stand on his own 2 feet, who built a life from scratch without anyone's handouts. And that's something no one can take away. I also realized revenge, while satisfying in the short term, isn't the end goal. Justice was necessary, but my peace comes from forgiveness. Not for them, but for myself. Forgiveness for holding on to anger that was poisoning me. Now, I focus on the people who actually show up for me, friends, mentors, and even new family I've chosen along the way. I've started traveling, investing in my passions, and building a future that's mine and mine alone. And every once in a while, when I think about Grandpa, I try to honor his memory by being the man he believed I could be. Because, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Looking back, this whole saga was one hell of a painful lesson. I lost a lot: family trust, innocence, and the comfort of pretending everything was okay. But I gained something far more valuable: clarity. I learned that favoritism in families can cause wounds deeper than any argument. It can twist love into manipulation and loyalty into betrayal. And sometimes, the people you think will protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. But I also learned that your worth isn't defined by what others take from you. It's about how you rise after they try to break you. I don't know if my relationship with my brother or parents will ever heal. Maybe it won't. And I'm okay with that. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. If you're reading this and feeling crushed by family unfairness, I want you to know you're not alone. It's okay to fight for what's right, but it's also okay to protect yourself, mentally and emotionally. It's messy, raw, and real, just like life. If anyone has been through something similar or has advice on how to move forward, I'm all ears.